The galaxy had known peace for 10,000 years. It was a peace forged through power, not kindness. For millennia, the great empires of the stars had maintained an unspoken order. The galaxy was vast, too vast for any one species to control it all, but the ancient races had mastered the art of balance. Diplomacy, trade, and treaties kept them all in check. There were no wars, no open conflicts. The peace was delicate, fragile even, but it worked. And it worked because the beings who ruled the galaxy were strong. They had the might, the technology, the armies to make sure it stayed that way. The laws of the galaxy were simple: respect the order or face annihilation. For 1,000 years, the Zorans, the oldest and most powerful race, had been the keepers of this peace. Their fleets patrolled the stars, their ships could vaporize entire cities with a single shot, and their soldiers were feared across the galaxy. Next to them were the Rahl, the Seraphs, the Arlons, the ancient empires that had stood for eons. They didn't trust each other, but they respected each other. And they feared what would happen if anyone broke the peace. The Zoran Empire ruled from the capital planet of Uther, a world bathed in silver light, where the Council of the Galaxy's greatest minds met to ensure the laws of the stars remained intact. The galaxy's major species traded, shared knowledge, and kept their hands to themselves. The Galactic Council was a symbol of peace, a promise that the galaxy would never again suffer the horrors of war. And for 10,000 years, it had worked. But peace, true peace, has a way of making you forget how fragile it is. When the humans first came, they were a mere blip in the radar. Earth was a backwater planet, isolated from the greater galaxy, locked in its own petty wars and struggles. The humans had no grand fleets, no empire, no real power to speak of. They were nothing more than a curiosity. The ancient species in the galaxy looked at them with indifference, another young species just beginning to reach the stars. A species that would learn, like all the others before them. That peace was something you earned by playing by the rules. At first, the humans were silent. They did not challenge the ancient ones. They made their first timid steps into the galactic arena, not as conquerors, but as learners. Their ships were crude, barely able to navigate the vast distances between the stars. They did not have the technology to match the great empires, but they had something else, something the galaxy didn't see coming. Humanity was relentless. In the beginning, they asked questions. They studied the ways of the galaxy. They learned the rules, then bent them. They were never satisfied with just surviving. They wanted to understand, to push forward, to break barriers. The humans were curious in a way that no one had seen before. They didn't accept things as they were. They challenged the status quo, not with violence at first, but with their own unique brand of stubbornness. As the years went by, humans began to grow. They made friends and enemies, built alliances, and traded goods. But with every step they took, they rubbed against the grain of the peaceful order the ancient species had worked so hard to create. Their persistence was infuriating to those who had been in charge for millennia. The Zorans watched, quietly irritated. They had seen new species rise before, only to fade into obscurity. The Rahl, the Seraphs, and the Arlons all laughed at the humans behind closed doors. They thought of Earth as nothing more than a passing curiosity. After all, what was a species of monkeys compared to the grandeur of their empires, their starships, their armies, their technology? It was all far beyond what the humans had. The peace had lasted for 10,000 years. It was unshakable, untouchable. But even the mightiest of walls can be cracked. It started with a small, insignificant incident, one that seemed like a minor disturbance to the galaxy's ruling powers. A human ship, a cargo freighter, had been accused of smuggling illegal goods, something that was a direct violation of galactic law. It was routine for the Council to act swiftly against such offenses. A simple apology from the humans, a fine, and the matter would be closed. After all, humans were new to the galaxy, and this would teach them their place. But the humans didn't apologize. They didn't even acknowledge their wrongdoing. Instead, they demanded evidence. They demanded to know exactly what the charges were. And when the Zorans sent in their enforcers, great warships bristling with weapons, they didn't back down. The humans fought. They fought with everything they had. The cargo freighter, outmatched and outgunned, turned its engines on the attacking fleet. It was small, barely a match for the massive warships, but it fought with such fury that the Zoran fleet was forced to retreat. The humans didn't just survive, they won. And they did so with nothing but guts and a deep, burning refusal to bow to anyone. It was the first sign that something was wrong in the galaxy. The Zorans were used to getting what they wanted. They were used to seeing other species cower, to seeing them obey. But humanity was different. They didn't bow, they didn't surrender. And that was when the galaxy began to realize something. Humanity would not play by the rules. They didn't just want to survive. They wanted to challenge the very foundations of the galaxy's peace. The ancient empires were starting to feel uneasy. They had ruled the stars for so long, and now there was this upstart species, this strange, unpredictable human race making waves. And they would soon learn that the humans were just getting started. After the human freighter's victory, the galaxy stood still. For the first time in millennia, the old empires found themselves confronted by something they didn't understand. They had watched humanity's arrival with distant amusement, thinking the humans would eventually fall in line like every other species before them. But now they were faced with the reality that these humans, these primitive creatures, had something that made them dangerous: defiance. The Zorans, as the galaxy's de facto rulers, had expected humans to apologize for their aggression. They expected submission, but instead they got a challenge. The Zorans sent envoys to Earth demanding an explanation, but the humans didn't cower. They didn't beg. Instead, they offered something else: an ultimatum. "We will not be intimidated. We will not follow your rules. We are humans, and we will chart our own course." The council was furious. They had never seen anything like it. The other races, Rahl, Seraphs, Arlons, watched in disbelief. They had lived for thousands of years, and in all that time, no species had ever dared to stand against them. There had always been respect, always an understanding of the power the empires held. But humanity had shattered that illusion in a single act of defiance. The Zorans quickly realized that a new approach was necessary. They would have to make an example of Earth. The gathering storm. The first move came swiftly. A fleet of Zoran warships, vast and deadly, arrived in Earth's orbit. The humans watched as the ships appeared in the sky, their weapons trained on the planet. It was a display of overwhelming force, a reminder of who controlled the galaxy. The humans had pushed their luck too far. Earth had never seen anything like it. The humans' initial shock turned into something else: a burning, fiery resolve. The message from the Zorans was clear: submit or face destruction. And yet when the humans looked at the skis, they saw not just an invasion fleet, but a challenge they could not ignore. The leaders of the human nations, though inexperienced in galactic warfare, didn't hesitate. They met in secret, locking themselves in war rooms. Their planet was on the line, their future and the stars at stake. But there was one thing they knew for certain: they were not going to go down quietly. "We are human," President Elias Hart said, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. "And we don't bow to anyone." The humans didn't have the fleets to face the Zorans head-on. They didn't have the advanced technology or the thousands of years of experience. What they had was something different: ingenuity. They were clever, and they were desperate. In every corner of Earth, humans began to build. They reverse-engineered what little alien technology they had. They scavenged the wreckage of old battles, studying every scrap of knowledge they could find. The factories roared to life, churning out weapons and ships at a pace the Zorans never expected. Within weeks, humanity began to adapt at an incredible speed. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't elegant, but it was enough to fight back. The battle for Earth. When the Zoran fleet made its move, it did so with overwhelming force. They launched their first strike, a barrage of energy blasts that should have wiped out Earth's defenses in an instant. But the humans, ready for it, had developed a crude but effective defense system. Their ships, small and unpolished compared to the Zoran behemoths, darted and weaved through the bombardment, using guerrilla tactics that the Zorans couldn't predict. It wasn't a fair fight, but it didn't matter. The humans weren't fighting to win. They were fighting for survival. President Hart's orders were simple: delay, hold the line. Give humanity time to rally, time to strike back. The Zoran commanders laughed at first. The humans, after all, were nothing more than a nuisance. They underestimated how far the humans had come. But as the days passed, the tide began to turn. The humans didn't stop fighting. They didn't retreat. They kept pushing, using every trick they had, every weapon they had built in secret. Each battle, each skirmish was harder than the last. The Zorans began to realize they had underestimated humanity, and it was too late to correct their mistake. The first major victory came when a small fleet of human ships, now equipped with stolen alien technology, managed to pierce through the Zoran fleet's defenses and take out one of their capital ships. It wasn't a crushing blow, but it was enough to send a message. Humanity wasn't afraid. They weren't backing down. It was the first true sign of human strength, the strength that had been ignored for so long by the galaxy's rulers. Humanity's resistance wasn't just about survival. It was about revenge. It was about making the galaxy remember that humans could stand against the mightiest of empires. The Zoran commanders were livid. They had expected humanity to cower, to break under pressure. Instead, they were met with a force of will unlike anything they had ever seen. The war escalated. The Zorans brought in more ships, more weapons, but so did the humans. Each side dug in. The fighting spread from Earth's atmosphere to the stars themselves, with each battle more desperate than the last. The galaxy, once so calm, now trembled with the sound of war. The Zorans were no longer just fighting a race of untested species. They were fighting humanity, and they had no idea how to stop it. And still, the humans fought. A new kind of war. The galaxy's great empires had relied on control. They had ruled with fear and technology, believing that no species could ever rise against them. But humanity was different. Humans didn't rely on fear. They didn't bend to the will of the powerful. They fought for something deeper, something they had learned through centuries of hardship: freedom. The war was no longer about just Earth's survival. It was about something bigger, something universal. It was about the defiance of a species that refused to be told they were less than anyone else. And the Zorans, they were starting to realize that they had made a terrible mistake. The humans had ignited something in the galaxy, a spark of rebellion, of courage, something that no empire, no matter how old, could ever crush. The storm was coming, and this time the old empires might not be able to stop it. The war for Earth had only just begun, but already it was clear. Humanity was not going to lose. The first battle had been won, not by power or technology, but by sheer, unyielding will. The Zorans had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. They had thought Earth's defenses would crumble under the weight of their advanced fleets. They thought humans would cower, surrender, and accept their fate. Instead, the humans fought back with a fury that rattled the galaxy's greatest empire. After the first battle, the Zoran fleet had retreated to regroup. But they didn't give up. They couldn't afford to. Earth was a symbol now, a symbol of defiance, a symbol of everything the galaxy's rulers feared. And if the humans weren't crushed, the peace that had held the galaxy together for 10,000 years would shatter. The Zoran High Command, shaken but resolute, ordered their second strike. This time they would bring everything to bear. The full might of their war fleet would descend on Earth. They would show the humans the cost of defiance. In the war rooms beneath the burning skies of Earth, humanity's leaders gathered in silence. The news had come hours earlier. The Zorans were coming back, bigger, stronger. They would not make the same mistake twice, but humanity was not afraid. They were united. For the first time in history, all the nations of Earth stood together, not as separate countries, but as a single force, one people. The unity that had always eluded them was now their strength. "We can't stop them head-on," President Elias Hart said, his voice steady but strained. "We don't have the firepower to face their fleet in open battle." A murmur of agreement ran through the room. They all knew it was true. The Zoran warships outclassed anything humanity had in space. But there was one thing the humans had that the Zorans couldn't prepare for. They had the will to fight. And more importantly, they had ingenuity. "We don't need to face them directly," President Hart continued, his eyes locked onto the digital map of Earth's orbit. "We need to hit them where it hurts." And hit them they did. Hours later, the Zoran fleet appeared. 10 massive ships, each one a floating city of war, arrived in Earth's orbit like the storm clouds before a thunderstrike. They spread across the sky, a terrifying display of power that seemed impossible to overcome. Each ship was bristling with weapons capable of annihilating entire continents, each one a symbol of the galaxy's might. The humans in their small, ragtag ships barely made a dent in their initial defenses. They had no chance of defeating the Zoran fleet head-on, not with their weapons. So they did the unthinkable. They used the one thing the Zorans never expected, the planet itself. As the Zoran fleet moved closer to Earth, humanity launched a series of surprise attacks. They had secretly planted powerful bombs in Earth's moon, deep in its caverns, with the intent to destabilize its orbit. The humans didn't have the luxury of time to fight a prolonged battle. They needed to end this quickly. The Zoran fleet moved into position, expecting to bombard Earth from above. But just as they did, humanity's plan went into action. With a deafening roar, the moon cracked, and a massive explosion sent a shockwave through the space surrounding Earth. The explosion wasn't meant to destroy the Zoran ships directly. It was meant to throw them off balance. The shockwave hit the Zoran fleet with full force, pushing their ships off course and scattering their formation. The explosion from the moon caused a debris field to form, obstructing the Zorans' line of sight and disrupting their targeting systems. It was chaos in the skies. In that moment, the humans struck. Their ships, once thought weak and insignificant, darted through the debris with precision and speed. They fired on the Zoran ships with a vengeance. The battle wasn't clean, it wasn't pretty, but it was relentless. One by one, human ships launched their attacks. They knew they wouldn't win with brute force, but they could hit where it mattered, and they did. They struck the weak points of the Zoran warships, shields, engines, and weapon systems. Every attack was calculated, every move designed to push the Zorans further into chaos. A human fighter piloted by Captain Eva Vasquez made a desperate run toward the lead Zoran ship. Her ship, the Vigilant, was barely functional, its hull scorched from previous encounters. But she didn't care. This was the moment they had been waiting for. If she could hit the flagship and disable its command systems, the whole fleet would fall apart. With a deep breath, Eva dove into the fray. She weaved through laser fire, using the debris to hide her approach. The Zoran ships didn't see her coming. The Vigilant slipped past their defenses and unleashed a precise volley into the flagship's command bridge. The explosion that followed sent ripples through the Zoran fleet. Their largest and most powerful ship, once the symbol of their unchallenged rule, was now crippled. Panic spread through the fleet. The once-proud Zorans were now scrambling, trying to salvage their empire. They couldn't keep up with the unpredictable, desperate strikes from the humans. Back on Earth, President Hart watched the battle unfold from his command center. His heart pounded in his chest, but he remained focused. The humans were making their mark. They were showing the Zorans that they were not to be underestimated. And as the days went on, humanity's forces continued to fight. The Zorans were losing, not because they were outnumbered or outgunned, but because the humans were not fighting for victory. They were fighting for survival. They were fighting for revenge. And with each strike, with each victory, the Zoran fleets began to realize that the humans had broken something inside them, their belief in their own invincibility. The galaxy's greatest empire, once so proud and powerful, was now on the verge of collapse. And it was all because they had underestimated the one thing that could never be measured, the human spirit. And it was that spirit that would carry them through the dark days ahead. Do you like this personality? The days following the destruction of the Zoran flagship were a whirlwind of chaos and triumph. The human fleet, though still outnumbered and under-equipped, had thrown the Zoran Empire into disarray. The once imposing military juggernaut now found itself fighting not against an inferior species, but against an enemy that understood the true nature of war. Humanity fought not out of fear, but out of defiance. Every strike, every maneuver was fueled by a single, burning desire, to prove that they would never, ever be ruled. The Zorans were rattled. They had come to Earth expecting to crush humanity in a matter of days, to remind the galaxy of their power and dominance. But instead, they had found themselves battling a foe that refused to die, a species that learned quickly and adapted faster. They had underestimated humanity, and now, with every passing hour, the fear began to spread through their ranks. The humans weren't just holding their own, they were making them afraid. Inside the Zoran War Council, the air was thick with tension. Supreme Commander Tishor, the leader of the Zoran military, stood before his generals, a look of cold fury etched on his face. His empire had always ruled through fear, and fear, as it turned out, was a terrible thing to lose. "We are losing," Tishor growled, his voice low and dangerous. "These humans, they fight like animals." He slammed his fist onto the table, the sound echoing across the room. "What was supposed to be a swift strike has turned into a nightmare. Their ships are unpredictable, their tactics unthinkable. I do not understand them." One of his generals, a veteran of 1,000 battles, stepped forward, her face lined with the scars of past wars. "Commander," she said, her voice steady but filled with concern, "the humans fight not because they want to conquer, but because they are desperate. And desperate creatures are the most dangerous of all. They have nothing left to lose. They will fight until every last one of them is gone." Tishor was silent for a long moment, his mind racing. He had fought countless enemies, seen entire civilizations bend to his will. But these humans, these unpredictable, stubborn creatures, had shattered everything he thought he knew about warfare. It was almost as if they had no fear, no weakness. They didn't care about the size of the fleet or the power of their weapons. They cared only about survival. Tishor finally spoke, his tone colder than ice. "We will bring them to their knees, we will break them, but we must act quickly. They are learning too fast. Soon they will be unstoppable." On Earth, the battle raged on. In the skies above, the humans' forces clashed with the Zorans in an epic struggle for survival. The human fleet had grown stronger, more coordinated as they continued to improve their weapons and tactics. But even so, they were still at a disadvantage. The Zoran warships were colossal, their weapons capable of decimating entire cities with a single blast. Yet humanity fought on, defiant, relentless, and determined to protect their home. In the midst of this chaos, one human ship stood out among the rest, the Vigilant. It was a ship that had once seemed like little more than a flying scrap heap, but now it had become a symbol of humanity's resilience. Captain Eva Vasquez, the leader of the Vigilant crew, was no longer just a soldier. She had become a beacon of hope for her people. "All systems are green, Captain," Lieutenant Marcus Daniels called from the navigation console, his voice tense but focused. "The Zoran fleet is closing in. We don't have much time." Eva nodded, her face set in grim determination. "We'll give them everything we've got. If we go down fighting." Her crew, the ragtag group of fighters, technicians, and engineers who had come together to defend Earth, didn't flinch. They had been through hell, and now they were fighting for more than their survival. They were fighting for their future. Every human ship, every fighter was part of something bigger. They were not just soldiers, they were the last stand of humanity. "We've already done the impossible," Eva said, her voice calm but filled with a fire that could not be extinguished. "Now let's do the unbelievable." As the Vigilant and its fleet of human ships charged toward the Zoran warships, the battle reached its boiling point. Explosions lit up the sky as human ships weaved through enemy fire, dodging and weaving with the precision born of desperation. They didn't have the technology to match the Zorans, but they had something else: heart. Captain Vasquez and her crew led the charge, using every ounce of their courage and cunning to land blow after blow against the Zoran ships. They knew they couldn't win with brute force. They had to outsmart their enemies, make the Zorans fight on humanity's terms, and that's exactly what they did. A sudden, daring maneuver from the Vigilant saw the ship narrowly evade a blast from a Zoran cruiser and slip into the enemy's rear. From there, they launched a devastating assault, targeting the weak points of the Zoran fleet's weapon systems. The Zorans retaliated with everything they had, but it was too late. The humans had taken the fight to them, and now the Zorans were the ones on the defensive. In the chaos of the battle, something unexpected happened. A massive Zoran warship, the Reaper, one of their most powerful vessels, fell silent. It was caught in the explosion from one of its own torpedoes. The shockwave tore through the ship, and it began to drift, helpless, towards Earth. The humans saw the opportunity. With all their remaining firepower, they launched a final, desperate attack. It was a move of pure defiance, pure willpower. The Reaper's engines were failing, and its shields were down. With one final strike, a human fighter, piloted by Captain Vasquez herself, slammed into the warship's core. The explosion that followed was the last straw. The mighty Zoran fleet, which had once crushed entire civilizations, faltered. Ships were damaged, commanders were in panic, and in that moment the Zorans realized humanity was not just a threat. Humanity was a force that could never be contained. The first blow had been struck, and the Zorans were left with one undeniable truth: they had awakened a sleeping giant. Back on Earth, the battle wasn't over, but the outcome had begun to shift. The Zorans were no longer the unstoppable force they had once been, and humanity, against all odds, had taken its first step toward victory. But as President Elia's heart looked out over the war-torn skies, he knew the hardest part was yet to come. The Zorans were down, but they weren't out. And as the humans had learned, nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. The true war for the galaxy had only just begun. The battle had changed. The momentum was now with the humans, but the Zorans were not done yet. They were wounded, yes, but not broken. They were an empire built on millennia of dominance, and they would not yield easily. Their pride had been hurt, and when pride is wounded, the true danger begins. Captain Eva Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Vigilant, looking out over the wreckage of the Zoran fleet. The atmosphere was thick with smoke, and the sky was alive with the flash of distant explosions. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from a deep, burning fire. They had done the impossible. They had taken down the Reaper and scattered the Zoran fleet, but she knew it wasn't over. "It's not over yet," Eva whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. She turned to her crew, who were all watching her, waiting for orders. "We've given them a black eye," Eva said, her voice strong but measured. "But they'll be back. The Zorans don't just give up. They'll regroup, and when they do, they'll come at us harder than ever." Lieutenant Daniels, ever loyal, nodded from his station. Then we hit them first. We don't let them catch their breath. Eva's lips curled into a small, determined smile. Exactly. We fight with everything we have, and we make sure they never forget the name human. Far away, aboard the Zoran flagship, Supreme Commander T-Shore was packing angrily, his thoughts boiling with rage and disbelief. His fleet had suffered a catastrophic defeat. The Vigilant and the humans had done something no one had ever expected, struck with a force and a will that shattered their confidence. The Zorans had been too sure of themselves, too confident in their power. Now T-Shore's world was falling apart. The Reaper was gone, and with it the backbone of the fleet. But it wasn't just the ships that were broken, it was their reputation. The Zorans had been humiliated, and humiliation was something no empire could stand. We underestimated them, T-Shore muttered to himself, staring at the damage reports flashing on the screen. They're not like the other species we've conquered. They fight differently, they don't follow the rules. He turned to his subordinates. Prepare for retaliation. We will bring every ship we have left. We will destroy them completely. One of his generals stepped forward, her face hard as stone. Commander, with all due respect, these humans, they aren't like the others. They aren't scared of us. T-Shore fixed her with a cold, calculating stare. We'll break them. If they don't fear us, they will fear what we do to their world. Back on Earth, the humans knew time was running out. They had a small window of opportunity to hit the Zorans while they were disorganized. The Zoran fleet, although scattered, was already regrouping. Earth's defenses, still weak compared to the invaders, needed time to rebuild. Humanity's only hope now was to strike at the heart of the Zoran war machine, to cripple their command structure before the Zorans could fully recover. President Elia's heart stood in the war room, his hands gripping the edge of the table. The situation was dire. The Zorans would retaliate, and they would retaliate hard. He knew it was only a matter of time before they brought everything they had to bear on Earth. We need to hit them now, Hart said, his voice grim. Before they can fully regroup, we can't give them the chance to rebuild their fleet. Eva Vasquez's voice came through the comms, strong and steady. President Hart, we've got a plan. It's risky, but it's our best shot. We've identified a Zoran command center on their homeworld, Uther. If we can take that out, we'll cripple their entire military network. Hart nodded. You have authorization. Do what you need to do. The plan was simple. Infiltrate the heart of the Zoran Empire, attack their command center on Uther, and disable their ability to communicate and coordinate. It was a suicide mission, but it was the only way to tip the scales in humanity's favor. The Vigilant, along with a handful of other human ships, would make a desperate final push into Zoran-controlled space. Eva stood in front of her crew, her face a mask of determination. This is it. We've fought for Earth, but now we fight for the future of humanity. We can't stop now. We take down their command center, we take down their empire if we fail. She didn't need to finish. Her crew knew what was at stake. They had all seen the look in the eyes of their families when they left Earth. They knew the risks, but they also knew this was their chance to win, to make the Zorans regret ever underestimating humanity. Let's go make history, Eva finished. The journey to Uther was perilous. The Zoran defenses were tightening, and the fleet of human ships had to navigate through layers of Zoran-controlled space, avoiding detection as much as possible. The Zoran warships were still recovering from their previous defeat, but they were closing in fast. Time was running out. When they reached Uther's orbit, the battle was already underway. Zoran ships swarmed in from every direction, trying to prevent the humans from getting any closer. But the humans were relentless, pushing forward despite the odds. Eva's heart raced as her crew fired on Zoran interceptors, weaving through the chaos, drawing closer to the heart of the Zoran Empire. We're almost there, Lieutenant Daniels shouted from his station. Eva's voice was steady, unwavering. Stay focused, we don't have a second chance. They hit the command center with everything they had. Missiles, laser blasts, everything they could throw at the heart of the Zoran war machine. And then, just as they were about to retreat, Eva saw it. A massive explosion from the Zoran command center, the shockwave sending ripples through space. It was done. The Zoran military had lost its nerve center. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. The humans had done it. They had struck at the heart of the Zoran Empire and crippled their command structure. The Zorans were reeling, unable to coordinate a proper counterattack. But while Earth celebrated, President Hart knew this was just one victory. The war was far from over. The Zorans were still powerful, still angry. But humanity had proven something that no one could ever take away. They had proven they could stand up to the might of the galaxy's most powerful empire and win. And they weren't done yet. The days after the attack on Uther were filled with chaos. The Zoran Empire, once an unstoppable force, was in disarray. Their command center had been shattered, their fleet thrown into disorganization. Humanity had struck at the heart of the Empire, and now the Zorans were scrambling to recover. But even in their desperation, the Zorans were not finished. They were wounded, yes, but still dangerous. Supreme Commander Tishor was not the kind of leader to bow to defeat. He had spent his life conquering and ruling, and the humiliation of being outmaneuvered by a lesser species burned deep in his pride. His thirst for revenge was now all-consuming. The Zorans gathered their remaining forces, rebuilding as quickly as they could. And in the cold darkness of space, the next wave of destruction began to take form. This time they wouldn't hold back. The Zorans had already underestimated humanity once. This time they would crush them completely. On Earth, President Elia's heart stood before a map of the galaxy. The Zorans were far from done. The shattered pieces of their fleet were reforming, and their anger was palpable. Earth's defenses, though improved, were still not strong enough to face the full might of the Zoran war machine. Humanity had taken a massive step forward, but the hardest battle was yet to come. "We've hurt them," Hart said, his voice heavy with resolve. "But they're coming for us. If we don't finish this, they'll come back stronger. We have one chance to end this war before it gets worse. We can't afford to wait." Eva Vasquez, captain of the Vigilant, stood in the war room watching the same map. Her face was set, her thoughts grim. The victory at Uther had been a turning point, but it had also made the Zorans more dangerous. They would want revenge. And when the Zorans came, they wouldn't come with mercy. They would come to destroy Earth, to wipe humanity off the map. "We've got one shot left," Eva said, looking at Hart. "We can't take them on in a drawn-out war. If we're going to win, we need to hit them before they can rebuild. We go for their homeworld. We finish what we started." Hart met her gaze, a look of quiet understanding between them. "You're right. If we don't take the fight to them now, we may never get another chance." The plan was bold, reckless even. The humans had no idea if they could succeed, but they knew they had to try. The Zorans were regrouping on Uther, their homeworld. If humanity could launch a final, all-out assault on the planet, they could cripple the heart of the Empire once and for all. The human fleet, small but determined, prepared to make the jump into Zoran-controlled space. Eva and her crew would lead the charge. It wasn't just about military might anymore, it was about sending a message. A message to the Zorans, a message to the galaxy, that humanity would never kneel, never surrender. As the fleet made its way toward Uther, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Every officer, every soldier knew that they might not return. The stakes had never been higher. The humans were not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their future, for the future of every species that had ever been oppressed by the might of the Zorans. The final push had begun. When the human fleet reached Uther's orbit, the battle began. The Zorans were ready for them. The planet's defenses were stronger than anything Earth had faced before. Every Zoran warship that had survived the previous battles was now on the defensive line, prepared to strike back with everything they had. But the humans had one advantage the Zorans didn't. They were fighting for everything. Their desperation was their strength. The Vigilant led the charge, its guns blazing as it tore through the ranks of Zoran warships. The human fleet attacked with precision, knowing they couldn't match the Zorans' firepower head-on. Instead, they used speed, agility, and their sheer will to survive. It was a brutal dance of death, with human ships darting through laser fire, striking hard and fast, then retreating before the Zorans could counterattack. Eva's voice was calm over the comms, though she could feel her heart racing in her chest. "Keep the pressure on them. We break their lines, we take Uther." The battle was fierce, but the humans refused to stop. Every strike they made felt like a piece of their soul. They were fighting not just for Earth, but for their place in the galaxy. They fought for their children, for their families. They fought because the Zorans had taken everything from them, freedom, dignity, and pride, and now humanity was giving it back. But as the battle raged, something unexpected happened. A Zoran ship, one of their most advanced warships, broke through the human defenses. It was massive, nearly twice the size of anything the humans had fought before. Its guns fired with devastating precision, wiping out human ships one by one. Eva's pulse quickened as the Zoran warship locked its sights on the Vigilant. The odds were quickly turning against them. "We can't keep dodging this thing," Lieutenant Daniels shouted. "We need to take it down now." Eva's mind raced. They couldn't outrun this ship. It was too powerful, too fast. There was only one option left, one final sacrifice. "All units focus fire on that ship," Eva ordered. "Give it everything you've got. I'll take the Vigilant in. We're going for its engines." The crew's eyes widened, but they trusted her. They followed her this far. Now they followed her into the jaws of death. The Vigilant darted through the chaos, weaving around debris and enemy fire, and headed straight for the Zoran ship. With a steady hand, Eva directed the Vigilant straight into the heart of the enemy vessel. As the ship shook from the impact of their missiles, Eva gave the order. "Now all cannons fire." The Vigilant's final barrage exploded against the Zoran ship's engine core, sending a massive shockwave through the space around Uther. The explosion tore the Zoran warship apart, scattering debris in every direction. The human fleet cheered, but Eva's heart sank. They had won this battle, but at a cost. As the dust settled, the Zoran fleet was in ruins. Uther, the heart of the Zoran Empire, was now in chaos. The humans had done the impossible. They had broken the might of the Zoran Empire. But as Eva stared out into the remnants of the battle, she knew this war wasn't over yet. They had won the fight, but the real war, for their future, had only just begun. The Zoran Empire had been brought to its knees. The heart of their military might, their command center on Uther, had been shattered, and their fleets, once an overwhelming force, were now in ruins. Humanity, against all odds, had struck the final blow. But even as the dust settled over the wreckage of the Zoran fleet, the galaxy knew one thing: the war was far from over. The humans had proven they could fight, and they had proven they could win. But what they hadn't proven yet was whether they could survive the retaliation of a desperate enemy. Eva Vasquez stood at the helm of the Vigilant, staring out at the dark expanse of space. Her hands gripped the controls, her face illuminated only by the flickering lights of the ship's dashboard. Around her, the crew was exhausted, battle-hardened, but still alive. The air in the ship felt heavy with the weight of what had just happened. They had won, but at what cost? "Eva," Lieutenant Daniels said, his voice hoarse from days of constant command. "We've taken down their fleets, but they're not going to let us get away with this. They'll rebuild. They'll come for us. They have to come for us." Eva nodded. "I know, but that was the point, wasn't it? To make them come for us. If they wanted to end this, they had to come to Earth. And now they've done exactly that." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the truth. The Zorans had been broken, but they were not gone. They would rebuild, regather their forces, and they would strike back. The final battle was still ahead, and humanity would face the full wrath of an empire on the verge of collapse. Back on Earth, the situation was just as tense. The news of the victory over Uther had spread like wildfire, but there was no celebration. Not yet. Everyone knew that the Zorans would not let the humans go unpunished. President Elia's heart sat in the war room, surrounded by his advisors. The map of Earth and the surrounding galaxy flickered on the screen in front of him. Zoran fleets had already begun regrouping at the edges of their territory, preparing for a final push to reclaim control. "This is it," Hart said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "We've brought them to the edge of defeat, but they're not finished yet. If we don't take the fight to them now, they will destroy everything we've fought for." General Harris, a seasoned military commander, looked over the data. "We don't have the forces to match them head-on anymore, not after the losses we've taken. Earth's defenses are still strong, but we're no match for the full might of their fleet." Hart's eyes narrowed. "Then we hit them where it hurts most." A silence fell over the room. Every officer in the room knew what Hart was suggesting. The time had come for the final, decisive blow. The plan was simple, but it would take everything the humans had left. The Zoran fleet was rebuilding near the outskirts of their empire, preparing for one last assault on Earth. The humans had one chance to stop them. Eva Vasquez and the crew of the Vigilant would lead the charge, but this time they would be taking a far more dangerous path. The plan was a desperate one, a deep strike into the heart of the Zoran fleet, a direct assault on their central command, the very heart of their power. "If we fail," Eva said, addressing her crew as they prepared for the mission, "this will be the end of humanity, but if we succeed, we end this war, for good." She looked each of them in the eye, seeing the weight of the decision in their faces. There was no turning back. They were about to go where no human had ever gone before, into the very jaws of the Zoran Empire. "We've fought for Earth," Eva continued. "We've fought for our future and will keep fighting no matter the cost." The crew nodded, their resolve hardening. Every one of them knew what was at stake, but they also knew that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. They were fighting for freedom, for hope, for the future of their children. The Vigilant and the human fleet made the jump into Zoran-controlled space. As they neared the center of the Zoran fleet, the scale of the battle ahead became clear. Hundreds of ships, Zoran warships, destroyers, and cruisers, lined up in a formation so dense that it felt like the stars themselves had been blotted out by their presence. The Zorans were ready. The humans were outnumbered. But there was no fear, not now, not after everything they had been through. Eva tightened her grip on the controls. "All units prepare to engage, keep the pressure on them. Our target is their central command ship. Take it down and the rest will fall." The battle was chaos. The Vigilant and the human fleet pushed forward, charging into the heart of the enemy's defenses. The Zoran fleet responded with brutal force, opening fire with everything they had. The Vigilant danced through the chaos, narrowly avoiding destruction as it surged toward the Zoran command ship. The human ships fought with the desperation of those who had nothing left to lose. Every cannon, every missile was aimed with precision. The Zorans fired back with overwhelming power, but the humans were relentless. The battle was personal now. It wasn't just about strategy or tactics, it was about survival. As the Vigilant neared the command ship, Eva's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. One last strike, one final chance to win. With a steady hand, Eva gave the command, "Fire." The Vigilant's cannons erupted, striking the heart of the Zoran command ship. The explosion that followed was deafening, sending shockwaves through space. For a moment, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Then, as the smoke cleared, the Zoran fleet faltered. Their command ship had been destroyed. Their communications were severed. Their fleet was disoriented. And in that moment, the human fleet pushed forward, taking advantage of the confusion to break through the remaining defenses. The battle for Earth was over. The Zorans, shattered and leaderless, retreated into the depths of space. They had lost, and humanity had won. On Earth, the news spread like wildfire. The Zorans had been defeated. The human race had done the impossible. They had faced down the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever seen and had emerged victorious. President Hart addressed the world, his voice filled with pride. "We did not just fight for Earth. We fought for the future. We fought for freedom. And we will continue to fight for as long as it takes to ensure that no one ever threatens us again." Humanity had survived, and with the defeat of the Zorans, they had shown the galaxy something that would never be forgotten, that no matter the odds, no matter the enemy, humanity would never be conquered.